My name is Alex Carter. I'm 41. The last time my father spoke to me with any meaning, he announced to a room of his associates that I was merely playing with toy soldiers and would never make anything of myself in the real world. That occurred 15 years ago during his retirement celebration from the diplomatic corps. I was a newly commissioned second lieutenant, straight out of the academy, full of idealism and starving for his acknowledgement. He presented my sister, Emily, as the family's true success. She had just secured a position at a top-tier law firm, while he brushed off my military commission as a youthful phase I would eventually outgrow. I should have anticipated it. Throughout our childhood, Emily was the model child, valedictorian, head of the debate club, and an early acceptance to a prestigious law school. I was the rugged son who chose field manuals over literary journals, who requested survival equipment for my birthday instead of a new watch. My father, a lifelong diplomat who prized cultured refinement and political savvy above all, could never grasp why his son wanted to crawl in the dirt and master hand-to-hand combat. The armed forces are a place for individuals who can't cut it in the civilian world, he would often remark whenever I discussed my aspiration to serve. It's a dead-end path, Alex. You're capable of more. But I wasn't capable of more. I was exactly that. Over the subsequent 15 years, as my father ascended the diplomatic ranks and Emily established her high-powered legal career, I constructed something entirely different. I dedicated my 20s to missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, directing intelligence operations that never graced the headlines but saved innumerable lives. I secured my Ranger qualification, my airborne certification, and my special operations credentials. By the time I was 30, I was a major overseeing counterinsurgency efforts on 3 different continents. At 35, I was a lieutenant colonel, advising generals and elected officials on dangers they couldn't even spell. By 40, I was Colonel Alex Carter, the commanding officer of the military's most secretive intelligence group, holding a security clearance so elevated that even stating my job title was a classified event. My father remained oblivious to all of this. So did Emily, who had married a federal attorney and relocated to the capital to be nearer the political circles she yearned to join. They existed in a sphere of receptions and benefit galas, sending me the occasional holiday card addressed to Major Carter, the last rank they remembered, at some generic military post office box. I allowed them to believe I was still that green second lieutenant who had mortified my father at his farewell party. It was simpler that way. My profession thrived in the shadows, and the weight of family expectations had always felt like a spotlight I could not afford. The call arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. It was Emily, her voice strained with a thinly veiled sense of alarm. "Alex, Dad's been taken into custody." The statement struck me like a stun grenade in a confined space. What? Treason charges. The Bureau raided his home yesterday. It's all over the media. They allege he passed state secrets to a foreign power for more than a decade. Her voice trembled. He's going to require the most skilled legal team available, and I have no connections who specialize in these kinds of federal cases. I sat in my office at the command center, gazing out at the Capitol's skyline, filtering this news through the prism of my expertise on foreign intelligence tactics. My father possessed the access, the motivation, and the means. He had always been resentful about being overlooked for ambassadorial roles, consistently lamenting that he was being underappreciated by inferior men. In the world I operated in, this profile made him a prime candidate for recruitment. "Where is the case being heard?" I inquired. "The federal district court in the Capitol." "Alex, I know we haven't been in touch, but he is still our father. Can you please just show up? He has been asking for you." 3 weeks later, I was seated in the last row of Judge Donovan's courtroom, observing my father's universe disintegrate in real time. The government's lawyers depicted him as a traitor who had betrayed his nation for financial gain and personal pride. Emily was positioned behind the defense counsel, her impeccable poise beginning to fray with every new piece of incriminating evidence. The chief prosecutor was a man I knew, Assistant U.S. Attorney Mark Weston, an individual I had briefed on numerous occasions about foreign intelligence activities. He was systematic, unforgiving, and entirely correct in his assertions. During a break, Emily found me in the corridor. She appeared worn out, her typically flawless grooming showing signs of stress. "This is a catastrophe," she murmured. "His attorney says the evidence is irrefutable. He's looking at a minimum of 20 years, possibly a life sentence." She seized my arm. "Alex, you're in a government position, aren't you? In the intelligence field. Is there nothing you can do?" I looked at my sister, the brilliant and successful Emily, who had never required assistance from anyone, for anything, and I felt an emotion I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't pity, but more like a detached acknowledgement of a shared lineage on the verge of being irrevocably tarnished. "Emily, I'm a mid-grade intelligence officer. I don't have the kind of influence you imagine." It wasn't a complete fabrication. I could have placed a few calls, leveraged contacts within the Justice Department or the intelligence sector. But the man being tried had violated everything I had dedicated my adult life to upholding. He had jeopardized American agents, compromised missions I had orchestrated, and put soldiers I had led in harm's way. More than that, he had belittled my service as a childish game while he was concurrently undermining the very nation I served. The trial went on for another week. With each passing day, I saw my father diminish in the defendant's chair, his diplomatic self-assurance eroding under the force of intercepted messages, bank statements, and statements from intelligence operatives he never knew were assets he had unwittingly exposed. On the last day, right before the concluding statements, Emily attempted one final, desperate move. She rose during a short recess and spoke to the courtroom audience, her voice projecting the practiced confidence of an experienced lawyer. "I need everyone present to understand that my father is a devoted citizen," she declared, her words bouncing off the stone walls. "He dedicated 30 years to serving this nation with the diplomatic corps. His son is a highly decorated military officer who served in Iraq and Afghanistan," she said, motioning in my direction. "Major Alex Carter has put his life on the line for this country. The notion that our father could be disloyal is preposterous." A buzz went through the audience. My father glanced at me with a glimmer of what looked like hope for the first time in the entire trial. Emily's desperate maneuver, using my military record to affirm his allegiance, lingered in the air like the residue from a faulty firework. It was then that Mark Weston, the prosecutor, glanced up from his documents with the look of a man who had just seen a ghost. "Pardon me," he said, his voice slicing through Emily's appeal. "Did you refer to him as Major Carter?" Emily affirmed with enthusiasm. "Yes, my brother Alex. He's been in intelligence, serving abroad. He can attest to our father's integrity." Weston's gaze met mine across the room. I saw the precise instant the pieces clicked into place for him. 3 years prior, I had briefed him on a counterintelligence mission that had dismantled a foreign spy network in the capital. He had reviewed my classified biography, knew my actual rank, and was fully aware of what my intelligence work abroad truly involved. "Your Honor," Weston stated deliberately, "if I could address this point." Judge Donovan gave a slight nod. "You may." Weston pivoted to Emily, then looked straight at me. "Ma'am, you stated your brother is Major Carter, an Army intelligence officer." "That is correct," Emily answered, her assurance growing. "He has been assigned to classified missions overseas. He comprehends the significance of national security more than anyone." The courtroom fell completely silent. My father leaned forward. Emily stood taller, believing she had discovered the argument that could acquit him. Weston gave a slow nod. "Colonel Carter," he said, his voice echoing through the courtroom like a gunshot. "Would you please rise?" The title of colonel landed on the spectators like a physical impact. Emily's face turned ashen. My father's jaw dropped. Every person in the room turned to look at me. I stood, my formal uniform crisp and stern under the institutional lighting. The silver insignia on my shoulders glittered. They were impossible to ignore, impossible to misinterpret. "Colonel Carter," Weston went on, his tone deferential yet solid, "you are the commanding officer of the 707th Intelligence Command. Is that right?" "That is correct. And you have been advising senior military leaders on foreign intelligence activities for the last 5 years." "Yes." Weston turned back to Emily, whose complexion had shifted from pale to sickly. "Ma'am, your brother is not a major serving overseas. He is a full colonel in command of one of the military's most elite intelligence organizations." His base of operations is here, where he has spent the last decade hunting individuals precisely like your father. The silence in the room was absolute. Emily collapsed into her seat as if she'd been struck. My father stared at me with a look I had never witnessed before. It wasn't contempt or disapproval, but something akin to pure dread. Judge Donovan regarded me with keen interest. "Colonel Carter, are you acquainted with the details of this case?" I met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, Your Honor, I have been monitoring it with great attention. And in your professional judgment, based on the evidence that has been presented, what is your assessment of the defendant's conduct?" The question hung in the room like a verdict waiting to be read. Emily was shaking her head in silent protest. My father looked as if he was about to be physically ill. The entire court held its breath. I looked at the man who had raised me, who had taught me the importance of honor and duty, and who then spent 15 years subverting every principle he claimed to stand for. The man who wrote off my life's work as playing with toy soldiers while he was actually playing the part of a spy for another country. It is textbook espionage, Your Honor. The methods of operation, the financial transactions, the intelligence transfers. It is a perfect match for what we train our counterintelligence personnel to detect and counter. My father made a noise like air slowly leaking from a tire. Emily hid her face in her hands. The audience broke into a flurry of whispers that Judge Donovan quickly quelled with his gavel. Weston gave a somber nod. "Thank you, Colonel. I have no more questions." The jury took less than 2 hours to reach a decision. Guilty on all counts. A sentence of 25 years in a federal prison. Following the sentencing, Emily confronted me in the courthouse's parking structure. Her flawless self-control had vanished, replaced by a raw, frantic energy. "How could you do that?" she demanded. "He is our father." "He is a traitor," I answered evenly. "I've dedicated 15 years to defending this nation from men just like him." "You could have supported him. You could have leveraged your position, made a few calls." I looked at my sister, the model child, who had never grasped that certain boundaries, once crossed, cannot be redrawn, that some betrayals are final. "Emily, I was not the one who put him in that courtroom. His decisions did. I was not the one who made him sell secrets to a foreign power. His own avarice and bitterness did that." I straightened my uniform jacket. I was simply asked a question, and I answered it truthfully. "But what about your family?" "I am an American soldier first. That is the one thing he could never grasp." Emily looked at me as if for the very first time, and in a sense, she was. The younger brother who had once desperately sought his father's validation, who had weathered years of scorn and condescension, who had been dismissed as a boy playing soldier, that person was no more. In his place stood Colonel Alex Carter, a man who had earned every insignia on his uniform, every medal on his chest, and every bit of the authority he now wielded. A man who had spent 15 years demonstrating he was far more than his father had ever conceived. As I turned to leave into the encroaching twilight, Emily called out to me once more. "What am I supposed to tell everyone? That my own brother ruined our family?" I stopped and turned to face her one last time. "Tell them your brother chose his country over his father's treason? Tell them he upheld his oath when our father broke his." I let that sink in. "Or just tell them he was playing with toy soldiers. It's up to you." 6 months later, I was promoted to Brigadier General. The investiture was at the Pentagon, with the Secretary of Defense himself affixing the star to my uniform. The commendation highlighted my exemplary service in the protection of national security and my steadfast dedication to the principles of the United States military. Emily was not present, nor was my father for self-evident reasons, but Mark Weston was in attendance, as was Judge Donovan and scores of officers whose careers had been influenced by my work in ways they would never completely understand. As I stood to attention and the military band played, I reflected on the second lieutenant who had been so thoroughly shamed at his father's retirement party 15 years before. He had yearned for that approval with such intensity, had been prepared to diminish himself for a chance to hear his father say he was proud. But validation that comes at the expense of one's own integrity is not validation at all. It is merely another kind of submission. I had spent 15 years discovering that the only approval that truly counts is the kind you earn from within, one hard choice at a time. The kind that is forged by honoring your commitments when it would be easier to break them. The kind that is born from choosing service over ease, nation over kin, and reality over comfortable falsehoods. That night I stood in my office at the command center, observing the city lights of the capital, wearing the star I had earned with sacrifice, toil, and an unyielding loyalty to a cause greater than myself. For the first time in my adult life, I required no one's approval. I possessed something far more valuable,